UK Prime Minister David Cameron began the new year sounding a cautious note on the economy. In his first speech of 2012, he highlighted the London Olympics and the Diamond Jubilee as key events that will raise Britain's profile abroad, but he warned that the jobs picture will remain weak.
There are fears about jobs and paying the bills. The search for work has become difficult, particularly for young people, and rising prices have hit household budgets. I get that. We are taking action on both fronts. I know how difficult it will be to get through this, but I also know that we will.
Meanwhile, in Berlin, Chancellor Angela Merkel spoke about the, quote, profound changes that Europe has undergone during the last 12 months. In her New Year's message, she urged the German people not to lose faith in the euro.
A common currency can only be successful if we work together more than ever in Europe. Europe is growing closer in the crisis. The road to overcome it remains long and not without setbacks. But at the end of this path, Europe will re-emerge stronger from the crisis than when it entered it.
Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor there. But can investors expect more of the same in 2012 and after a tough November and December for the euro? Is it wise to be holding the single currency? With us now from Singapore, we're pleased to have the opportunity to talk once again with Jim Rogers, CEO and Chairman of Rogers Holdings. Happy New Year to you, Jim. Thanks for giving up your time for us once again.
Happy New Year to you, Jeff.
Let's dive in then. Unfinished business surrounding the euro, and we have seen this dip below 130 on euro dollar. I think back in November when we spoke, you said you like the currency. How do you feel about it at the moment?
Well, Jeff, I sold some euros a few weeks ago, but I'm actually thinking about buying. I still have plenty of euros. I think I'm buying more. I read somewhere, maybe on CNBC, that there's a huge short position now, that the hedge funds are all short the euro. So I'm contemplating buying more. I haven't yet, but I'm certainly not selling.
And you're buying it because you're expecting what to happen?
Well, I suspect that Merkel and that crowd are going to do something to make us feel better. Remember, the French have an election this year, and I think they'd like to win the election. So I suspect you're going to see a lot of things coming out of governments for the euro. By the way, Jeff, there are 40 elections, I think 40 elections in 2012 around the world. So you're going to see a lot of distortions in a lot of markets because a lot of governments are going to be spending huge amounts of money and printing lots of money.
So when you say you're expecting something to happen, does that mean the ECB is going to begin more seriously monetizing this government debt that we see in the peripheries? And if that happens, you don't see that as a necessary negative weakening for the euro, that's a strengthening.
That's a strengthening in the market for a while. It's a horrible mistake. It's a terrible, terrible decision to do that. And we're all going to pay for it down the road, just as we're all going to pay for the horrible mistakes that the American Central Bank and American government are making. But, Jeff, if in 2012 in the U.S. they spend staggering amounts of money and print lots of money, a lot of people are going to feel much better in 2012 and their friends. 2013 and 14 will be a terrible hangover for all of us. But we got to get from here to there.
Jim, I don't buy your argument that because there are elections happening in Europe, that means that European governments are going to get their act together and come up with a solution. If anything, it's going to make it more difficult for the European governments to come up with a solution. All these leaders have to agree to make anything happen. If they're all fighting their own corners, trying to win domestic battles at home, that doesn't mean they're going to come to better agreements when you put all those leaders together in a room.
Becky, I must not have made myself clear. What I said was they're going to make us all feel better for a while to get through the elections. No. This is all going to end in terrible disaster for all of us. As I said, 2013, 2014 is going to be a big mess. But in the meantime, Becky, it seems to me that Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Sarkozy and the others are all in this together. And you saw what they did last week. The central bank said, we will put up more money. This is all just designed to get through the next election. This is not a solution to the problem. So this is making the problem worse long term.
You really believe we have 2 years that this can still drag on before we come to some kind of finale?
I think it's more likely by the fall of 2012 that the markets will start saying, come on, guys, we've had enough of this. We know this is a sham. We know this is a charade. We're not going to play anymore. But I suspect we're going to get something good is going to happen between now and the next few weeks or months. But by the fall of 2012, I would be very worried.
Hi, Jim. It's Jeremy Stretch in the studio from CIBC. Just one question in terms of the policy prescription you're sort of outlining. Do you seriously expect, though, you're talking about the election process and the desire of the politicians, but do you seriously expect Merkel to roll over and accept that the monetization process can actually be perpetuated or really kick off? Because, of course, the Germans are implacably opposed to this because, of course, historically they have an obvious fear about the ramifications of that.
And I am implacably opposed to it as well. I hope I'm making myself clear. And yes, the Germans, I hope, will in the end have a deep-seated aversion to that sort of thing. But also, Mrs. Merkel's playing two games. Remember, she's trying to unify the Europe more and more and more. And then I suspect, like any good politician, she will give up some short-term things for the long-term gains. Her plan is to make the euro strong as the Deutschmark again, with Germany in control. But to do that, she's got to get from here to there. So far, everything she's trying to do is trying to make the central power, if you will, more dominant and more powerful.
But in order to actually get to that process, if she does sanction those kind of decisions, her ability to actually get through her election next year, I think, will look increasingly unlikely. So it may well be the case that on that sort of scenario that she may well be committing almost electoral suicide by agreeing that sort of policy prescription.
Well, again, I don't know what's going on in Mrs. Merkel's head. I know she's a lot smarter than most of those European politicians. I know she knows that. Every German knows that they hate bailing out the Greeks. Every German knows, every Finn knows, everybody in Northern Europe knows that they don't want to bail out the Portuguese and the Greeks anymore. She knows that better than you and I do, because she knows that could lose her the election unless she comes through with something which makes everything better for a while and means that the Germans, at least on paper, don't have to bail out the Greeks sitting on the beach drinking ouzo.
Jim, the Swiss franc has been seen as a safe place to park money by Germans and others who fled the euro. What's your thoughts on the likely performance of the Swiss franc through 2012 if you anticipate a stronger euro?
Well, I own the Swiss franc, Jeff. I own more of the Swiss franc than I own of the euro. I'm actually thinking about buying the Swiss franc even more seriously than the euro because, you know, the Swiss government said we're going to not let the Swiss franc go up anymore. They knocked it down for a while, but it's been my experience in currency markets that the markets have more money than any central bank, and if I'm right, there's going to be a lot of currency turmoil in 2012, and people are going to be looking for safe havens, and the safe havens that they look for are the Swiss franc, the yen, and the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is not a safe haven. I'm not even sure the yen is. But I'm thinking about buying more Swiss francs because the markets have more money than they do.